Hey everybody, it's Mike Schumann of the Daily Hoosier here for another episode of the East 17th Street podcast. I am joined by Seth Tow, and today's topic, among others, is number 2 Indiana hosting UCLA. Gosh, Seth, it sounds so weird to say number 2 Indiana, 7-0 Indiana, but that is where we are. And before we get into the season to date and the upcoming game against UCLA, I think I want to start with Curt Cignetti's new contract. We got that last week, or we got the news last week. We got a copy of the memorandum of understanding yesterday, and it by and large was standard stuff, but there was a couple of unique things in there that I really wanted to talk about because I've not seen this kind of stuff before. The thing probably that jumped out to me the most in this memorandum of understanding is a provision that adjusts Signetti's buyout due to IU if he were to leave in the event that President Pam Whitten or AD Scott Dolson are no longer at IU if and when Signetti were to leave. It really jumped out to me because he said, over the last year on multiple occasions, how great, Pam Whitten and Scott Dolson are. And I'm thinking, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's what coaches always say. But this is like in writing evidence that he means it. Like there's a clear alignment with Signetti and with the administration here that he values to have this put into the contract. And old timers like me will recognize that, you think back to the Bob Knight era, there were like shifts in the presidents and ADs that, he got along with or didn't get along with, and it impacted relationships and, his happiness in his role. And I think you're seeing a little bit of that here where he's basically saying in writing and placing a value on it, if these people aren't around, I want to at least have the option to get out of the situation at a better price. So that really jumped off the page to me.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt that it's going to be the type of thing where we'd ever find out, but I'd be interested to know, I guess, how that clause came about because, I think you make good points that, it puts, in writing what he said out loud, just that, how important Dolson and Whitten are to, how much he values those two and the way that they work together as kind of a trio with the football program. I can see scenarios where it kind of benefits the other two, where it benefits Pam Whitten and Scott Dolson as well
Mm-hmm.
to have
Yep.
that in there, to maybe maintain holds on their positions. Not that I think Scott Dolson, Pam Whitten, I'm not going down that whole discussion that could open up, but at least with Dolson, I mean, I don't think there's, given how the athletic department has fared the last few years, I don't think there's any concern about, people coming for his job, but I think it at least, gives him that security that as long as Signetti keeps rolling, I should be fine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's a bilateral contract and it signed by everybody. It suggests everybody kind of values what they've got right now. I think that's maybe the most fair way to look at it. And I think, in that, like they all see mutual benefits to continuing a good thing that's going on here. And I do think, I get, like, I hear all the chatter and noise about Witten, and I'm like you, I don't want to get into it, but I do think from an athletic standpoint, purely, like, she clearly values football, places a lot of emphasis on it. You don't get that from presidents a lot. A lot of them are, academic focused, which they should be, but there is a synergy between athletics and sports that can be monetized and capitalized on. And you know what, look, they I'm not going to say Witten and Dolson got lucky here, but you know, Signetti's like a 1 in a million shot based on what he's done so far. So it's not like they were these great visionaries to discover him necessarily, but they do know that they've got a good thing and they're capitalizing on it.
I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that they got lucky a little bit. I mean, I think even when they hired Signetti, I can't imagine that they really seriously predicted that this is what it was going to look like by, year two,
I mean,
going to the
who could
playoff
have?
last year. Right, exactly. I mean, you put all those clauses in the contract, but I mean, who saw that coming? Where, and Signetti's going to talk, obviously, his talk the talk, but it's still just unbelievable, obviously, what's happened with this program. And I mean, there's just an element of luck across all sports. I mean,
Sure.
you make your own luck in some ways, but I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that they got lucky, that they got lucky in that, the timing worked out for them to get Signetti. They got lucky that, Signetti, showed it, actually decided to take the job. I mean, there is elements of luck in there.
Yeah, yeah. There's no doubt that there is. But I think people are gonna, call Scott a visionary. They're gonna model decisions based on what he's done here, other ads, other schools. So lucky, smart, it's all probably irrelevant, but to the point of not being able to see it coming, like I'm still there. Like I typed number 2 in the banner on the screen here. I'm like, no, that can't be right. 7-0 can't be right. But it is where we are. The other aspect of the contract I thought was really interesting is there's a toggle for like a fair market value adjustment beginning this year. So we could potentially be revisiting this contract in a month or two. Anytime IU reaches the CFP semis, which if they get a bye this year would be just basically if they win one game, um, they have to go back and basically do a fair market value assessment of his contract and make sure it's in line with the market, make sure that he's in the top 3 of all coaches. And similarly for the coaching staff, they have to make sure, what was it? 10th nationally, 5th in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Which is something I want to come back to, but the overarching point there is like that's just screams football school. Like we not only are we saying you get a raise, you get this, you get that, all these bonuses for being a coach and being really damn good at it, we are going to put ourselves on the line to basically make sure it stays that way. These are the little toggles that say not only are we with you now, we're with you forever, or you have the right to move on.
I mean, yeah, and it would be hard to say that that's not earned if they get to the semifinals of the college football playoff. I mean,
Right.
that's what triggers, that, that fair market reevaluation. And I mean, look, only 4 teams in the country get to make
Right.
the CFP semifinals. It's not like that's something that's likely to happen every year. Like, even if the program is rolling, I mean, and they're, consistently in the top 10, I mean, going to the semis every year just isn't something you can bank on every year, just because it's sports, it's football. When you're playing another top 10 team, things happen out on the field. But I mean, you're right that this is how a football school acts, and that's how you get somebody like Signetti to stay at Indiana and stave off, the big names that could come calling at some point.
Yeah, I forget who it was. Somebody on the national landscape yesterday was saying that Saban had a similar thing in his agreement with Alabama. So that might be where that concept came from. But with the assistant coaching pool, what I think is interesting is I'll doom here for a second. I firmly believe it's going to be even harder this year for Indiana to retain Shanahan and Haynes. Like I'll be stunned if at least one of them's not gone, if not both. Like they've got to be the 2 hottest coordinators in college football right now, or among them. So I wonder, say that happens and they have 2 new coordinators next year. Like it seems like it's going to be difficult to stay in that, top 10 nationally, top 5 in the Big Ten, just because are you really going to pay 2 new guys that much money?
I mean, I think it depends on who you're getting. I mean, I think it gives you the ability to recruit really talented coordinators. If you lose one or both of them, I think it gives you flexibility to go after some big names if
Right.
that's what Signetti wants. And I mean, we know Signetti to be the type that isn't going to try to win the press conference with a hire. He's going to,
Right.
he would bring in a guy that he, believes in and thinks is going to help the team. But if that guy happens to be, one of these other, rising young coaches that's going to command a lot of money, it gives you the flexibility to do that. and it also allows him to retain look around at some of the position coaches on the team that, maybe guys that could, you could kind of promote internally into a coordinator role and keep those guys around instead of, seeing some guys like Pat Kuntz could step into a role like that, and you stave off interest from other programs and putting some of those position coaches in coordinator positions as well.
Yeah, it will whenever it happens this year or next or whenever. It'll be interesting to see how Signetti handles it. He seems like a guy that would promote from within, maybe a little bit more so than others because he values the culture so much. And some of the lower level guys have even been with him for a long time. You mentioned Kuntz, like he's the one that comes to mind to replace Haynes when that day comes. But I don't say that based off any information. On the offensive side, it would be a little bit less clear to me who they might promote from within because they got some young guys, and I don't think Bosted's looking to be an OC.
Yeah.
So that's all interesting, but I just thought that was an interesting element to the contract and how that might work. I would suspect if they had two new guys and they weren't quite in that range of compensation, they might just let that go for a year or two to just to see, or they, like you said, they just give everybody else a raise. But yeah, that's neither here nor there at this point. Look, I want to talk about what's possible. I got asked this on a radio spot yesterday, and I thought it was like, I think it's still because I just can't wrap my mind around what's going on. It may be easier for you because you're younger. Like this, my entire lifetime has been just god awful Indiana football for, multiple generations at this point. And we walked through it yesterday. I think everything is legitimately on the line. A bye in the CFP, contending for a national title, playing in the Big Ten title game, having a quarterback win the Heisman. Like, is any of that at this point? It seems like that all the national pundits that were kind of questioning Indiana have gotten on board after that Oregon game. Is any of that like, just fan talk at this point?
I mean, I think it's hard to say otherwise. I think you look at this team and I don't know if I'd go so far to say there's no weaknesses at all on the team, but the weaknesses that are there are pretty minimal. I mean,
Yeah.
so occasionally you see some breakdowns in the secondary, and sometimes you see parts of the offensive line struggling, but I mean, there's not a lot of weaknesses on this team. And to be fair, like when they go up against another really high caliber team, maybe some of those little weaknesses I just mentioned could play a bigger factor in the game. But I mean, we're not going to see that for. I mean, we're not going to see that for a little while at least. So,
Right.
I don't think everything is absolutely on the table. I mean, Fernando Mendoza is a legitimate Heisman candidate. He's one of the favorites right now to win the award, and there's still a long way to go to win that race and to really narrow in on who's actually involved in that race. And frankly, I mean, the Heisman race, I think this year, it feels super, super wide open. I like Mendoza aside, I think it's probably one of the more wide open Heisman races in several years. I think there's just, even at this point last year, you think back to last year, I mean, Travis Hunter, the debate, he won the award, and the debate over whether, Hunter was going to be a worthy winner, for what he did on the field versus just kind of, he plays both sides. He plays a lot of snaps, like the debate about that. It started probably around now, like last season. And,
Right.
he was really narrowed in and on the spotlight. But at this point now, I mean, Mendoza's the favorite to win, one of the favorites to win the award. But when I looked at I think yesterday, he was like plus 340. And there are like two other guys that were like plus 350 or plus 400, and like two or three other guys that were, plus 700, plus 800. It's just, it's clear that like this is not just like, oh, it's Mendoza or Ty Simpson. Like there's 5 or 6, 7 guys as of now that you could realistically see winning the award, and names could still come out of left field. It's just a really wide open Heisman race, but that's beside the point from your question. That yes, everything
Well, it's
does
part
feel,
of it.
yeah, everything is on the table for this team. I mean, it's not, you watch this team week in, week out, and I mean, right now, like if Indiana and Ohio State were going to go up against each other in the Big Ten title game, I mean, I think Ohio State would probably be favored. But if you ask me, do I think Indiana could win? If you, I don't know if I would say Indiana will win, but if you ask me if Indiana could win, absolutely they could. I think they could beat Ohio State. Absolutely, I think they could get to the semifinals, the national title game. I mean, this is a legitimately good football team.
Yeah. Good segue there with Ohio State, because I think if everything went according to what the odds makers are saying and like projections like FBI, like that will be the Big Ten title game. It would be a number 1 versus number 2 Big Ten title game, and it might ultimately have a say in the Heisman because Julian Sayan's right there as well. His numbers are off the charts so far. Actually, I think he's got a better completion percentage than Mendoza, with everything else kind of right there in line. So that, you talk about a game with everything on the line, and you talk about a Saturday with everything in Indianapolis for IU fans.
Mm-hmm.
You have Indiana versus Louisville at Cambridge in the afternoon. You could have number
Basketball.
1 versus number 2 football game in the evening. That's like a dream Saturday for IU fans who are in the Indy area, and dream for me for media who don't have to travel very far to cover it all.
That would work out nicely.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. One of the things that makes me wonder if it's possible, I agree with the notion of no weaknesses. In fact, if you go listen to UCLA coach Tim Skipper's media availability on Monday, he said that. He said Indiana has no weaknesses, and I don't think that's lip service. I think he means it. I mean it. But one thing that does concern me is depth on this team. And we saw a big injury in Saturday's game. Kellen Wyatt, defensive end / outside linebacker, goes down late in the game, early in the fourth quarter. And it's a big loss. It is a legitimately big loss. Now, if you ask me, like, who are the 2 guys they can't afford to lose on each side of the ball, I'd say Mendoza and Aiden Fisher. But there's a group of guys right behind them, and I would put Wyatt in that group. That he's important. I do think depth along the defensive line is one of the strengths of the team, so it doesn't concern me quite as much. But you listen to Signetti talk about Kellen Wyatt. He was very impressed. He had a lot of praise, and Signetti doesn't throw out praise unless he means it. So I think Wyatt has been very valuable in a number of ways. When I look at what's going to happen, I don't think it's going to be like okay, somebody was right behind him on the depth chart, they're just going to replace him. I think he was on the field some with Stephen Daly. They were rotating some. That's going to be one answer. I think at the end of that game, you saw Daniel Ndukwe get his first snaps of the season on defense. I don't think that was by coincidence. I think they recognized that they needed to get him on the field. He's probably going to see some snaps. So, there's going to have to be some reshuffling here, but I don't think it's something that's going to be a deal where they can't overcome it.
No, I think I agree. Number one, Ndukwe is a guy that, I mean, I guess we're going to find out if he's ready for a bigger role. I mean, certainly I don't think he's going to be counted on for extended snaps, but I think like you said, I think he's going to become part of that. I don't even know if I'd say he's going to become part of the rotation, because I think it really is going to start becoming, Kamara on one side and Stephen Daly on the other.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to find out if Ndukwe is ready, and he's a guy who has played well on special teams the last couple of years, and was a promising recruit when he came over with Signetti last year. And I think he's a guy that it's certainly possible that he's a guy that, well, let's put it this way. He's a guy that Indiana probably next season is going to be penciling into that defensive end rotation. And so, now is his chance to really show what he's got there. On Stephen Daly, Kellen Wyatt was having a great season. eight tackles for loss, was really impactful every game. Stephen Daly is quietly right behind him at 7.5
Right.
tackles for loss. And I was pretty surprised when I saw that mark, just because it feels like Kellen Wyatt has been so much more impactful than Stephen Daly. But I mean, Daly at 7.5 tackles for loss, Mikhail Kamara's, we've talked plenty about Mikhail Kamara and his numbers being down more this season. And part of this is, that you may need Kamara to, step it up a bit and get his numbers back to where you might expect them to be. But I mean, Stephen Daly is right there in terms of production with Kellen Wyatt, and he's looked good and he's got a lot of speed. We talked to him yesterday at media availability. He was a track star in high school at running the 100-meter at like 2:30.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. So he's a fast guy, but he's been impactful, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if you don't really notice the Kellen Wyatt loss if Stephen Daly keeps playing the way he's been playing.
Yeah, no, and I think Daly's played about 40 less snaps than Wyatt, so that production has come on less time on the field. He weighs about, I looked it up, I think it was like 15, 16 more pounds than Wyatt. I think he's played more snaps on the interior than Wyatt. So that's what makes me think Ndukwe's gonna see a role. I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be like suddenly he's on the field every play. Could be more like Isaiah Jones getting more time. I'm just seeing it like a situation where, like, on clear passing situations, you probably, if you're going to have that guy on the outside linebacker spot drop into coverage, you may not want it to be Daly. I don't know, but he also, like, he was the guy that had the deflection against Oregon that led to the Lewis Moore interception. He had 2 sacks against Michigan State. So he's been coming on strong. So I think it's, if there was a spot where they had to have this happen, this is probably not the worst spot, is all I can say about it.
Yeah. Another potential solution, I think, you don't see him out there as much, and it's partially because he's been so good inside. But I think, especially if you think Daly could play inside a little more and gives you some flexibility, I wonder if they'd move Mario Landino out on the edge a little bit more, because he can play out on the edge. And I mean, he's, like I said, he's been really good inside for Indiana, but that could be another option to kind of help make up those lost snaps.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I think he's another guy that might be in the mix to move out. I'm sure they've spent the whole week tinkering with different ideas along these lines, but the right side of the defensive line will certainly be something to watch on Saturday when Indiana hosts UCLA. And let's transition into that subject. We got big noon kickoff on site again. What is it, the third time in 2 years that they've been here? I think when did they start? 10 a.m., 10:30. You can line up. I know you sent this stuff out earlier, but if you're so inclined, you can line up outside and do your signs. And if you're more like me and just want to watch from home, you can do that too. but I think it's just another indication that the real point for me here is, like, I remember, and I'm sure you remember, where IU was almost like a staple on the BTN noon kickoff, which is kind of like the last spot that the team, if nobody like Fox or CBS wants you, you end up at noon on BTN. IU is yet to be on noon at BTN this year. They're back in the CBS 3:30 spot for Maryland next weekend. So they are an in-demand entity right now across the Big Ten, because these TV outlets fight over these spots. That's why it's part of the reason why there's a delay in announcing the games, is they want to see who's good, and I don't know exactly how it works, but it's a competitive situation in terms of who gets what game, and sometimes the scraps are left for BTN at noon, and Indiana hasn't been there. This one will be at noon, but it will be on Fox with the marquee crew of Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt. So a lot of eyeballs on IU football once again.
Yeah, I mean, it tells you, one, about the viewership numbers that Indiana games must be bringing in, but also, I mean, when you have that number 2 next to your name, you're just going to be that instant there's that instant attraction there that, think about a casual college football fan that's just flipping through channels, their team doesn't play until 7 p.m. They're just seeing who's on and seeing what games are interesting. Oh, number 2 is on. I'll stay on this game for a little bit. I mean, there's just that's always going to be, a thing, no matter, it could be number 2 San Jose State, and no disrespect to San Jose State, but if San Jose State was number 2 in the country and you're flipping channels and you saw number 2, you're more likely to leave that game on for a little bit. It's just, I mean, that's the power of the polls, I should say.
Yeah, and there's probably, at least there's no doubt in my mind, that part of it too is just Signetti himself. Like, what's this crazy guy going to say this week? What crazy facial expression is he going to have on his face when he's up by 42 in the third quarter? Like, just he's a fun cover, I'm sure, for the TV outlets, just like he is for us.
Yeah. And I mean, you get to, the actual matchup. And I mean, this isn't the cakewalk that it appeared to be going into the season for Indiana. The way that UCLA has just completely flipped things around since their coaching changed. And Curt Cignetti said it on Monday that they're viewing it like they're playing a 3-0 football team, which, I mean, that's their UCLA's record since they fired Deshaun Foster and promoted Tim Skipper to interim head coach. And I mean, they do just look like a different football team. And so there's that, for people who are paying attention to the Big Ten and have seen what UCLA has been doing, I mean, it's not the worst matchup of the day.
Yeah, no, it's you're hitting all my transition points, segues here. Talking about UCLA, I watched Tim Skipper's Monday availability. I think I already mentioned that. Like, man, the energy this guy has is noticeable. The positive light that he's bringing. Sounds like Signetti talking about one game at a time. All the usual stuff. And watching Deshaun Foster last year and during the offseason this year, man, just night and day, Skipper and Foster, and you can almost kind of see how the the positive stuff you're seeing on the field can come from the change in the coaching staff, just watching the difference in those two.
Yeah, I mean, I will never forget being at Big Ten Media Day and seeing Deshaun Foster last year stumble under the bright lights at the podium up there and just not have any idea what to say and tell everybody, I don't know if you know much about UCLA, we're in Los Angeles. And that's that was maybe the first sign that they might be in trouble there. But yeah, I mean, you're right that, I mean, they do have a different energy about them. And I mean, certainly, upsetting Penn State the way they did is going to give you a nice energy boost. But I mean, they've kept it up the last 2 games, which is just as impressive because those are, easy spots. You got a big win. You weren't expected to do much this season. Now things are feeling good. You start feeling good about yourself. That's an easy spot. Signetti talks a lot about fighting human nature, and it can be human nature to kind of start feeling good about yourself and, maybe slip a little bit mentally. And UCLA, to their credit, has backed it up the last couple of weeks. Now, Michigan State and Maryland are not the greatest opponents in the world, but still, I think, like I said, there's something to be said about mentally just staying locked in and backing it up.
Yeah, and if I'm Signetti, the thing I'm highlighting to my team is that UCLA beat Michigan State by the exact same score that you did, 38-13, and they did it on the road. So I don't know where you point to and say any reason why Indiana is any better than UCLA if you're a coach and you want to try to play that game with your team. Now, I think we all have reasons why we think Indiana is better, but that I would say that's a pretty good talking point to get people's attention. Just looking at the numbers, UCLA is number 104 in scoring offense at 22.4 points per contest, but over the last 3 games, the 3-game winning streak, they're at 33.3 a game. Unfortunately for Tino Sinceri, that's a reflection of since he's been gone. So hopefully his next stop goes better. I'm sure he'll get another opportunity somewhere else. But it's been a similar story on the defensive side where UCLA is giving up 27.4 a game, which comes in at number 94. But under Skipper, that's dropped to 21 points a game. So it's just been a complete improvement. And I would suspect Their first game with Skipper, they lost at Northwestern, which has turned out to be a pretty good loss on the road. I suspect with the offensive coordinator change, they had a little bit of element of surprise against Penn State. That seems to have dissipated. Like the offense didn't really play well against Maryland last week, and so it could be a situation where the scouting that teams have done early in the season on UCLA, they kind of had to start from scratch. We heard Curt Cignetti talk about this, how they were only really watching 3 games, but that's probably enough games to get a good sense for what they're doing. I heard the UCLA people saying they've really simplified things, and it's worked for the team on both sides of the ball. I've heard them say on defense they're a lot more. They do things that people aren't used to seeing, so they've changed. But I think now that you have 3-4 games under this new staff, I think maybe that Maryland score is starting to highlight that people are starting to say, okay, we know what these guys are doing now, where maybe against Penn State it was kind of a complete element of surprise.
Yeah, I think you look at certainly like the balance of rush versus pass, and UCLA in the last 3 games, their rushing numbers are all up quite a bit from what it was earlier in the season. And I mean, they in the last 3 games, rushing yards, they had 269, 238, 193. The 4 games before that, 84, 173, 109, 131. So it's just a stark difference in the running game, and just the way that they're, not forcing Nico to throw the ball a ton of times and try to play through the air like that. It's been a much more balanced offense. I actually don't even know if I'd say their offense played that poorly against Maryland. I mean, they put up over 400 yards of offense in the game. They finished at 414 yards, and I think obviously, it was a lower scoring game, and they were trailing going into the fourth quarter. They needed 13. They needed 13 points in the fourth quarter to pull out that win. But I mean, I don't know if I'd say their offense played poorly in that game. I mean, they rushed for 193, passed for 221. 414 yards of offense. I mean, Maryland, not as good, okay team, not great,
Right.
but I mean, still not a total pushover. And, this was, maybe it says something there that, I mean, I guess, the Penn State game aside, I mean, Penn State was obviously going through some stuff when UCLA played
Right.
them. But I mean, this was kind of the first, real, test. Let's see if we can pull it out type of game under this new staff. And I mean, they pulled it out.
Yeah, and I think if Nico can be as good or perhaps even a better version of Aiden Childs, like, they probably feel pretty good about being able to come into this game and control the clock a little bit like Michigan State did in those first 2 drives. I have no doubt that that's going to be their game plan, and Nico's, got the arm talent and the legs to pull it off. So, that's assuming that he plays. It's worth mentioning that he did suffer an injury in that Maryland game, but I don't think he ever missed a snap. He came out of the game, maybe after a hit at the end of a drive, but came back in on the next drive. But there's certainly some question about it because Skipper got asked about it on Monday. I think people from the UCLA beat were posting yesterday that he was back in practice. So it sounds like he's going to play, but that's at least something to look at. But it's just still thinking about that Michigan State game and what they were able to do with those first couple drives. Do you think UCLA could kind of emulate that a little bit?
Well, here's what I would say would concern me if I'm, looking at, if I'm wanting UCLA to come in and do what Michigan State did offensively to kind of throw Indiana's defense off. When you go into PFF for Nico and you pull up, his grades on in passing depth, different parts of the field, he's very strong in the medium routes, 10 to 19 yards, and the intermediate routes there. He's, got a really high grade there. It's much, much lower in the short game. And that's where I think Michigan State, we talked about it on our post-game video about what Michigan State was doing to kind of take Indiana's defense out of rhythm early in the game. And I thought so much of it had to do with that kind of east to west style of play where they were hammering a lot of screens, a lot of quick
Mm-hmm.
reads, and letting their wide receivers go make some plays, and just taking Indiana's defensive line really out of the picture for a lot of that, beginning of the game. I mean, that grade of 63.8 for Nico on short passes, 0 to 9 yards, that's not encouraging. I got it. That's not encouraging for their ability to be able to do that. It's up to 70.8 for passes behind the line of scrimmage, but I would hope that most quarterbacks are grading moderately all right, at least on on passes behind the line of scrimmage.
Right.
So I in theory, I think Nico's, he's built similarly, to maybe is he a little bigger than Childs? I don't
I
know
think
the
he's
exact.
taller. I think I
Yeah,
saw Nico 6'6", so that he might be one of the taller
yeah, he is
quarterbacks
six
out there.
six. Yeah, so I mean, he's got the build, and in theory, he obviously can run the ball. We know that, and he's got that kind of skill set that's similar to Childs and all of that. But I don't think it's an exact replica, and I think that if he's not consistently able to hit those short routes, I think that is going to be a big difference between what Michigan State was able to do and what UCLA could do. It's had so much to do with those short passes and those quick reads that just neutralized whatever impact Indiana's defensive line could have.
Yeah, and to the point, like if he's not effective in the short game, he's been sacked 16 times, which is 2.3 per game, 97th in the country. So if he's not comfortable, or if he's not looking for the short routes and wants to take shots down the field, that the Indiana's pass rush could come more into play if that happens. Anything else we want to talk about with UCLA or big picture before we kind of restate our predictions for this game?
No, I can't think of anything.
Okay. Well, we can wrap it up here for this week. I think this game is obviously taken on such a dramatically different look than what we talked about before the season, what we would have talked about if we were talking about it 3 weeks into the season. I think our comparison point going into the season was last year's game out at the Rose Bowl, which was a 42-13 Indiana win, and we all kind of circled it as kind of the statement game that put Indiana kind of in the national spotlight a little bit. But I just don't even see how it's relevant. New quarterback, new coach, kind of new everything, and I do think UCLA is going to be competitive in this game. The one thing that gives me pause about saying that is this will be their 5th game in a row. The skipper was saying they're a little bit beat up. I don't think Nico's the only guy that's got some bumps and bruises among key players, and they're playing at a 9 a.m. kickoff for them on the road, which, maybe we make too much of that, but I think there's some data out there that says that's a pretty tough thing. So I think UCLA will be competitive, but I think they'll ultimately fade in this game. I'm going to go 38-17 Indiana. What about you?
I will say 41-21.
All right. All right. You got the Bruins putting some points up.
Yeah, I think they have the opportunity to do so. I mean, I think strategically we'll see if they try to control the clock or if they are going to just try to put the pressure on Indiana to continue responding, which, I mean, as we've seen plenty of times this season, may not be the best strategy because Indiana does respond. But I think they'll have the opportunity to put some points up.
Fair enough. I think we can leave it there. We do have also on Sunday just another sign of the strange times. We're barely talking about an IU basketball exhibition game. I think it's going to be a informative game. They play Baylor on Sunday at Cambridge. I believe it's a 1:00 tip. The first time we will see Darren DeVries take on a team from a high major standpoint. I think the game's out in Puerto Rico against the mega team. Those were probably maybe a step below high major if I had to guess, so the Baylor game will be probably the best indication yet what we've got, but it's still going to be an exhibition. you made a comment before we went on here about don't forget about potential overreaction to the Tennessee exhibition last year. I think that's pretty spot on for a number of reasons. Coaches just aren't, they're not pulling the same levers in an exhibition that they would in a regular season game. But you can get information, especially about individual players. Like what does the player look like when he's up against the type of competition that he's going to face throughout the Big Ten and in some of the key non-conference games. So we'll have more information on that in next week's episode. We'll talk about what we see in that regard. But for now, I think we can leave it there. He is Seth Tow. I am Mike Schumann for the Daily Hoosier and the East 17th Street podcast. We will catch you all next time.